Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here, back again with a daily dose of doom and gloom, your World War III report. As you probably can appreciate, I don't get out much anymore, at least. Especially seeing as I live in the middle of nowhere, aka Canada. So it's a very rare occurrence for us to see a military vehicle driving around town. I mean, it almost never happens. And when it does, it's like a busted up Humvee on the back of a military flat deck, or maybe a couple deuce and a halves, like 50-year-old vehicles with government license plates, probably being driven by cadets or something. Nothing really notable anywhere else, but here, that's local news. That's how much happens here right now. When SHTF happens, a whole lot is going to be going down in Canada, but for now anyways, just how we like it, not much happens. Apparently, that is not the case in Russia, where people are normalized to a higher level of military activity. As you're seeing behind me, there is a procession of what appears to be intercontinental ballistic nuclear missiles moving through a residential neighborhood. Now, why am I showing you this video? According to the poster of this video, this is near the region of the Finnish and Russian border. A border town, I can't remember what it's called, I'll show you guys the map afterwards. But why would they be moving these very large nuclear weapons that can hit a target pretty much anywhere on Earth that they might want to, close to the Finnish border? Well, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense from a military perspective, because you would want to use shorter or medium range, tactical, more precision guided missiles if you were going to do something like that, not these types of ICBMs, which indeed could hit a target. They could hit Finland, but you don't need to put them right next to the Finnish border. In fact, they're almost targets if they're that close. So why would you put them there other than to make a statement, is my guess. That would be my guess if the claims of the person who's posted this video are true, that this is in fact showing nuclear missiles moving towards the direction of Finland, who of course just became a NATO member. At least that is the reasoning. I'll show you the other reason why it really doesn't matter. Because right across from Finland, okay, so we're going to go to Finland for a second. This is Finland right here. This is Russia. This is the Kola Peninsula. I'll zoom in for you a bit. This is where the majority, the highest concentration of nuclear weapons in the world are located, and they're only a few hundred kilometers from the Finnish border. So, I mean, Helsinki's going to be very, very sinky if the shizzy hits the fizzy. They're going to be the first to go, regardless of whether Russia moves ICBMs to this Vyborg place, where apparently this video was shot right here. I can't see it making a whole lot of difference, but you just need to know that there's a nuclear triad based out of here. I believe 20 submarines, 750 ICBMs on bombers, on mobile platforms. So, I mean, I don't really understand why they would want to do that, what strategic utility that would have other than to flex on NATO. And the fact is, we likely wouldn't win a war, a nuclear war, with the Russians. We would probably survive, some of us, which is going to suck. But that's our duty as organisms of this planet, to keep on fighting to the bitter end. And unfortunately, we likely will go with a whimper and not a bang. Now, let's talk about China, because something's going on in China right now. China is currently embarking on a 3-day combat readiness exercise. They are surrounding Taiwan with warships and military planes as I do this video. Taiwan, accordingly, is mobilizing certain aspects of their military in response to this, because they don't know if this is real world or exercise. All major military offensives will start under the guise of being an exercise, okay? Because that's the only way you can really misdirect in the information age, is to pretend that it's an exercise. Recall, that's how the Ukraine conflict started. Russia was just doing an exercise on their border. So we can presume that any major offensive that is going to be initiated by an offender will be under the guise of an exercise, hence my saying there are no military exercises, only World War III disguises. What's more troubling is that we're going to see some of the largest military exercises ever conducted by NATO this year. We've already seen some of the largest conducted on the Korean Peninsula this year and in France, and it's only going to ratchet up. So we need to always assume that these could be potential launching points for real-world military activities. Anyways, the U.S. decided to pop its head in today and say, hey, we're ready for a war with China. In fact, we might even put boots on the ground if we get the approval from the American people. Now, right now, I don't think the American people are going to bite on something like this, but I would not put it past the capabilities of the mass media to convince people that we needed to fight a war with Taiwan. Understand that if we go to war with China over Taiwan, everything that you see in a big box store, 90% of that stuff simply won't be there. A lot of the medications that we rely on will be in incredible short supply, if non-existent at all. I'm sure that China would still commit to some trade with the United States in spite of the fact that we're at war with them, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of that trade would come to a halt, probably even if only for national security reasons, because they would really have to step up security around what's being sent in all those shipping containers. But the other problem is that there was so much traffic in the Taiwan Strait. I mean, this is the Taiwan Strait. This is a real-time marine tracking system, okay? And this shows you all of the ships moving through the Taiwan Strait right now. And there's just thousands of ships, trillions of dollars worth of trade is conducted through this strait. And it would have to effectively be shut down if there was a war and an attempt at a landed invasion on the island, if you can call it that. It's so big, it's really, to call it an island is kind of an understatement. But of course, the airspace would be closed. All this would impact international trade. So just the closing of the strait alone would lead to major supply chain hiccups. But then if you actually had a suspension of trade and sanctions put on the Chinese for intervening in Taiwan, which it appears as though it's probably going to happen because our supposed strategic ambiguity on the Taiwan issue is no more. It's pretty clear to the Chinese after the Taiwanese president visited the country and met with some of our highest ranking political officials that we no longer are taking the strategic approach. We no longer honor the one China policy, and that China is going to have to take Taiwan by hook or by crook, by force, which means it's only a matter of time before this actually happens. Now, another OSINT, open source intelligence gathering person in the Twitter community, posted today that North Korea hasn't spoken with South Korea on their back channels in around 48 hours. Within that 48 hours, North Korea has conducted successfully, so they claim, a test of an underwater drone which is capable of deploying a nuclear weapon, which of course could induce a radioactive tsunami, very similar to what the Russians created. Of course, this is what the North Koreans are claiming they would use against the American fleets of warships and aircraft carriers that are in the region. So things are not looking good right now, to say the least. If that's not all, we have the U.S. sending a nuclear-powered submarine. As far as I know, there are no nukes on board this submarine, but what do we know? To the Middle East. Now, the timing of this is very suspect, considering that Saudi Arabia, just a couple days ago, and this got no media attention, and this tells you everything that you need to know, they've effectively declared the war with Yemen to be over. In fact, they're also making peace with Iran. The biggest potential conflict has, at least for the time being, been quelled right now, thanks to the Chinese, who helped broker a peace deal between those two countries. And now they're not even going to fight with the Yemenis. So why, at this point in time, would the U.S. feel the need to send a nuclear-powered submarine with 150 Tomahawk missiles to this region? Does it have something to do with the fact that the Israelis right now are clearly trying to provoke the Islamic community within their country to get some sort of response? Because they got the domestic issues galore right now. It's really the brink of civil war in Israel. And what Netanyahu has done in this, if I was a betting man, I would bet that this whole storming of the mosque thing, that was all a provocation because they knew that Hamas and Hezbollah and the Gaza Strip would erupt, they would respond. So it would create this war, this greater enemy, right? So that the people there would take their attention away from focusing on the government passing through their draconian legislations and focus instead on the boogeyman, right? And of course, now that the United States is heading over there, and they, of course, are saying that they support Israel and whatever they're doing, because why not? Why not start yet another war? There's too much peace going on there. We got to send over a submarine with a bunch of Tomahawk missiles. Let's see what happens. Now, I forgot to mention that China has vowed to inspect ships, Taiwanese ships in particular, commercial vessels, and of course they're going to say that they're doing this to likely ensure that the Taiwanese are not smuggling. Of course, Taiwan views itself as independent. I'm going to be using a lot of air quotes, guys. Just get used to it, because that's what you got to do if you're trying to remain objective. The Taiwanese commercial vessels may be searched by Chinese patrol ships, military ships. Now, the Taiwanese government is encouraging these commercial vessels not to comply with these orders if they're attempted to be boarded by these Chinese vessels. Of course, this could be a potential point of engagement. Now, a lot of these commercial vessels are not going to have a security force which is going to be sizable enough to stave off any sort of offensive or inspection regimen that is put on them by the Chinese military. So many of them will likely be forced to comply. Now, what happens when they attempt to do this with a Taiwanese warship is the question. So in addition to the fact that they're surrounding the island with this military exercise and the Taiwanese are mobilizing, there's also this new practice or policy that they're putting into place where they can just arbitrarily flag down Taiwanese commercial vessels with the suspicion that they might be transporting weapons from the United States or whatever the case might be, and that's where a potential war could start. As I said, Russia is allegedly sending more nukes to Finnish border, but it doesn't really matter. As I explained, Biden is extending the national emergency, which was first initiated by Obama back in 2014 in response to the Russians annexing Crimea. This is something which happens on an annual basis, and it's just been done again, so it's just a sign that the war is likely going nowhere. People are talking about a stalemate. Some are talking about a counteroffensive. I really can't see this conflict ending in a stalemate at this point in time. I mean, that would be the best possible thing that could happen, but it appears as though both sides are just building their forces, getting ready for a major conflict between surrounding countries in addition to just Ukraine. We have the largest NATO exercise in history starting in June, complete with tens of thousands of troops and hundreds of aircraft on the heels of France's largest military exercise in history, and many of the sort on the Korean Peninsula, and more missiles fired in North Korea in the last few months than I think since, we started keeping records. So things are not looking up. Israel is starting a conflict in the Middle East, at least that's my theory, to take attention away from their own domestic issues. The bird flu is so bad in Japan that there's no more space to bury the chickens. Now, I'm sure there's a bit of hyperbole to this, but apparently they've had to bury 17 million chickens as a result of bird flu. Bird flu is just rampant. It is absolutely everywhere. This is not to say that 17 million chickens, of course, contracted the bird flu, but if you have one in a lot of 100,000 even, obviously not one, but I mean, you have to take precautions, I guess, so it doesn't spread. Anyways, the price of eggs and poultry is through the roof there, and it's likely only going to continue. Right now, we have migrations happening, so every migratory period, whether it be the equinox or the this transition from winter to spring, and then the transition from fall to winter when the birds migrate from north to south. Like right now, we're having a migration of geese back up to the north. They always come up here. Millions of geese come back to Canada. And right now, they're bringing with them bird flu. In fact, a domesticated dog, somebody's pet, died recently of bird flu in Canada. So it's already here, it's everywhere. It's only a matter of time before it jumps the species barrier and starts to transmit. Russia continues its mobilization, mobilizing hundreds of thousands of troops this year. There was a major ice storm in Canada. Millions were without power temporarily. I think a lot of them have had that power restored, and this was due to an ice storm which was not as substantial as the one that was back in Quebec in the early 2000s. Nonetheless, all the more reason to, in the very least, have a 72-hour kit if you live in a climate, any climate that relies on natural gas, and you don't have a contingency plan for how you are going to keep warm, then you need to do that because it's of great importance, especially this day and age. We got record high sea temperatures, record high global temperatures. We got tornadoes like crazy in the Midwest, and that's due to a record high pressure system and a record low pressure system coming into contact with one another right over the grain belt. Of course, we got record drought, we got record grain prices, we're going to have record energy prices this year. So all the more reason to keep on prepping. 16 minutes in and I haven't even started the map yet. Holy tamale. Where should we go first? Let's talk about this China stuff because this is getting weird. Chinese military rehearsing the encirclement of Taiwan. So they view Taiwan as a breakaway province of China, and they've issued another stern warning. They only seem to do this after the meetings have been conducted. So is this just China lashing out? What is this really about? I mean, it seems like this is destined to end in a military engagement because Taiwan does not want to be China's Hong Kong. Although many military analysts are saying that this is the only feasible outcome from a military standpoint without Taiwan being effectively destroyed. I was talking with David Pine the other day, and he says that the attack would likely start with a massive cyber attack, possibly even the utilization of an EMP over Taiwan, a small-scale EMP that would take out power and infrastructure on the entire island. I think they have nuclear power there, so I'm not sure how that factors into the calculus of this conflict. But yeah, China is starting to mobilize, and the Taiwanese military is currently on the alert. Now we have video here of, in this video, this was released by the Chinese military. I don't know if this is just a compilation people put together, if this is just a propaganda video that the Chinese made to try to scare the Taiwanese, but apparently there's a lot of naval activity right now. A lot of the footage looks too B-roll-ish and looks too high production to be just strewn together last minute. So obviously this is something that the Chinese would have had prepared and set to go. I don't know what the words say. It's just showing a bunch of guys doing a bunch of activity, a bunch of planes, military planes getting off the ground. But China's production capacity for military equipment is much greater than ours. And it's only increasing by the day, and it's only a matter of time before a lot of their factories are going to be converted to, shipbuilding factories and armament building factories. This is another Chinese aircraft carrier that is currently in the Taiwan Strait. This video was taken today by a fishing vessel, I do believe. So things could happen any minute. You can see that the seas are pretty gnarly right now, so this is not an ideal time to be doing any sort of landed invasion. In fact, I think it's going to be like this. I think it's like this for the majority of the year, but there are brief windows, and I don't think this is one of those seasons, but I could be wrong. I know I've talked about that on the channel before, but it escapes me exactly when those ideal opportune times are. As I said, you have all this traffic through the Taiwan Strait. If that gets slowed down, then yeah, we're going to see COVID-level supply chain disruptions all over again. Here's some images of this torpedo that the North Koreans are claiming can be nuclear tipped. Okay, so this is going to, I'm pretty sure that the Americans tested underwater nukes in the past. There's a lot of footage of that kind of stuff, but this is what they theoretically would use if they, engaged in a war in a conventional, I guess it wouldn't be conventional anymore, would it? So this is an interesting piece of information. The South Korean government has reportedly been unable to reach North Korea through military and diplomatic channels, including emergency deconfliction lines, for over 2 days now. These sorts of communications usually happens multiple times per day. This is from OSINT Defender. Typically, this source is fairly accurate in terms of what they report on. So I'll give him that. I'm not going to take it to the bank or anything. This is another post by that individual saying that anti-ship missile units from the Rapid Response Haifeng Brigade of the Taiwanese Navy have reportedly been spotted along the Ping-yi Highway, moving to tactical positions across the country. And they're showing what appears to be a still photo from a video. So it could very well be, this could be it. I mean, this could be the war starting in Taiwan. I don't think the military activity is of a significant amount yet that we would presume that the big war is about to start. But if they got an aircraft carrier in the region, and you just never know. So U.S. Congress would approve troop deployment to Taiwan should China attack the island, Representative Michael McCall said. He says that U.S. Congress would authorize a direct military confrontation with China if Beijing launches an attack against Taiwan. American lawmakers would consent to putting boots on the ground if people in the U.S. would support the measure. Again, I would put nothing beyond the capabilities of the mainstream media to convince people that we needed to do something so monumentally stupid. This is an interesting infographic of North Korean ballistic missile capabilities. As you can see here, the Hwasong 15 has a range of 13,000 kilometers. So if I just zoom in here, so this is the range, okay? So the Hwasong can basically hit anywhere. It can hit out to Mexico, basically. And I'm going to presume that that also means anywhere in North America. But if you had to detonate a nuke, and you were the North Koreans, you'd probably try to do it in the form of an electromagnetic pulse. The North Koreans do have a couple satellites which supposedly aren't sending back any signals. There's 2 of these satellites. Some military analysts suspect that they're actually nuclear weapons. They're EMP weapons that will be used when the time comes in order to, basically lights out the United States and friends. A Russian aircraft factory was on fire. Apparently the Russian air defense in Voronezh failed. A factory produced aircraft is on fire. Obviously language barrier there, but this clearly was another act of sabotage. I talked the other day about, it almost became a bit of a meme. People were making jokes in the comment section about what might have caused the fire in the Russian Defense Ministry in Moscow. People were making things up like, it was a toaster or somebody dropped their cigarette, and it became this running meme where people were, instead of making, interesting comments, were just making jokes about what might have caused the fire. Anyways, I appreciate the engagement. This is not good, because this just means that the war is getting further and further behind Russian lines, and that means that they're going to be forced. They're going to have no other alternative but to escalate the conflict. And I'll tell you where it may well escalate in the coming days ahead. Okay, I think I briefly talked about how Russia is going to be doing all these combat drills in and around Finland with their S-400s, their Super Sukhois, and blah, blah, blah. Talked about that. So we have people like this, one of Zelensky's aides, saying everything in Russia must be, everything we must eradicate, everything Russian must be eradicated in Crimea, according to a Zelensky aide. Sorry guys, it's the weekend and I haven't had a day off in weeks, probably months. Anyways, you got people like this who are hardliners saying that they're never going to relent on an inch of what was originally Ukrainian soil, meaning that the war has nowhere to go but up in terms of escalation. Now, this is what's going on, and this is where they think the offensive is going to come. In Zaporozhye, they've been building miles and miles of trenches like this, okay? Trenches that are going to be lined with wood, so it's not just a muddy trench. So they are planning, to dig in for the long haul, and this is the direction that they're worried about Ukraine doing this offensive. So saboteurs' activity in Zaporozhye shows Kiev's offensive may begin soon. As preparations for an offensive, we clearly see the growing activity of saboteurs in this region, and this, of course, is problematic because this is where the big Energodar nuclear power plant is. So if we see an offensive in this direction, then that nuclear power plant is also going to be at a high risk, and we could very well see some kind of incident transpire along there. But they're building 70 kilometers of these mega trenches to try to prevent, because what the Ukrainians are going to try to do is they're going to try to come down, cut off Crimea from any land bridge, and then they're going to try to backfill into Crimea. I've spoken about that before. French pension protesters storm BlackRock headquarters. I'm not sure if I have a video of that one. People are saying, oh, the protest is about BlackRock. No, that's just one other aspect of it. Look, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I'm talking about the French government. And I'm by no means an apologist for the French government, but understand, when you're not having enough kids, then you don't have a large enough tax base. Now, you can be one of these libertarians who thinks that we don't have to pay taxes. I would agree with you to a certain extent, but the way the society is set up right now, you can't have pensions without taxes. So either you extend the pension age, or you raise taxes, or you maybe don't support go nowhere wars. That's another thing you can do too. But yeah, of course they're going to raid the BlackRock building. I mean, why wouldn't you do that, right? This is a nationwide protest, so they're going to infiltrate most places. Anyways, what else do we got going on here in the world? I talked about NATO holding its largest ever air exercises in June, 220 aircraft, 10, I think they forgot to put a comma in here, 100,000 personnel, I'm going to presume, from 24 nations. That is just massive, okay? So you got to ask yourself, why would they be doing something like this right now? And we got something else brewing here. This is from antiwar.com. U.S. will threaten Europe to implement sanctions on Russia. The White House plans to send a clear message to its European partners in the economic war against Russia. You're either with us or against us. Recall, it's the Europeans who are getting the short end of the stick, because they're the ones who are paying through the roof for energy, and they're the ones who are at a constant state of DEFCON 2, also as a result of being so close to the fire. So it's only a matter of time before one of these leaders pushes back a little bit. You're seeing Macron trying to be the guy who's working and playing both sides of the fence with his recent visit to China, I believe. But I think that's, I don't put too much stock in Macron's ability to do much less broker a peace deal. Moscow warns of chaos in the Arctic. This is where a lot of instability might emerge, in addition to the instability everywhere else. We're going to be getting a new Doomsday plane. Yay, Northrop, Lockheed, and Raytheon team up to make a new Doomsday plane. There's not going to be a whole lot of new features on it, as far as I'm told, but anyways, something to be mindful of. This is interesting. Clearview AI scrapped 30 billion images from Facebook and other social media websites that gave them to cops. It puts everyone into a perpetual police lineup. So they've done it. They've basically collated all of the images from online that you've posted online, and now they're going to have that in a database where they're going to be able to identify everybody. So we've all been tricked. We've all been tricked into the panopticon. What else is new? Tesla employees shared sensitive images recorded by the cars. I wonder if they got the one where I was giving them the finger that day, when they wouldn't let me use the autopilot on the car unless I unblock the in-cabin camera. That's just really, really creepy. And, you know, Elon Musk, he's a cool guy and all, but at the end of the day, I think the system's going to win with him. In that, you know, the draconian system that we're all under, its influence is going to override any best intentions he might have for the world. Central bank gold buying shows no signs of slowing down. In fact, the Chinese keep buying more gold. They bought another 25 tons in February. Let's see what happens with gold on Monday. Apparently the ruble was down in the last couple days. There was some video circulating which was kind of suspect that was showing Russians allegedly trying to either get money out of the bank or convert their rubles into dollars. I'm not so sure about that. What that might signal is that there's another conflict coming, because typically what happens in times of uncertainty, the US dollar gets a big boost. And if anything, the US dollar needs that boost right now to remain the top dog, to remain the economic safe haven before these relationships between Saudi Arabia, Iran, and BRICS and all these things can really start to take shape and take away market share. Regardless, the leader of the IMF has said that the world faces its weakest growth since 1990, that the next 5 years are likely going to be recessionary ones. We have this stuff about NATO plans for Ukraine war leaked. Again, some military analysts have chalked that up to being inconsequential for the most part in terms of questioning the legitimacy of the so-called leak. Even the Russians, I don't think, or at least Russian media agencies, are not so convinced that this was actually a leak. This could have just been a leak to make the Russians think that the Ukrainians were going to be engaging in some offensive. So it could just be more misdirection, right? We just don't know. What else we got going on here? Top U.S. shipping gateway mostly closes due to port worker shortage, employer group. So this is bad because this is one of the main ports where you get a lot of your stuff from. So I would expect some delays and potentially shortages in various items. I think that's about it. We got the oceans warming up. Record high warm temperatures in the oceans. And I believe March, this was the second warmest March on record. I think last year was the warmest, but I can't recall. Anyways, we got all this crazy stuff going on here in the Middle East. Right now, hundreds are barricading themselves inside a mosque. And of course, that's going to prompt Israel to do something. And when they do that, then Hezbollah and Hamas is going to respond. And that is going to escalate tensions between Israel and Lebanon and Syria and likely Iran as well, which is why the U.S. is sending a nuclear submarine there amid soaring Iranian tensions. They're blaming this on Iran, right? They're blaming all of this stuff right here on Iran. That's the Israelis. And Israel's chief of staff has ordered the mobilization of reserves with an emphasis on the air defense and offensive formations of the Air Force. So the shit's getting ready to go down. You know, I mean, there's just too much peace talk going on here. I mean, you've had two major peace arrangements between Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Iran. This should be something that we are celebrating and rejoicing over. Instead, they're really just rattling the hornet's nest once again. I don't know why you would do that unless you were trying to distract away from your own domestic issues and you know, we were just at the behest of the military-industrial complex. Let me know what you guys think about in the comments section below. Make sure to get your Jace medical kits, your antibiotic kits. I'll post a link in the description because you never know when the flow of medications, 90% of which come from China, are just going to cease. We're really at a point now where any hour, you know, tensions could reach a breaking point in the Taiwan Strait, and then we're at war with the Chinese. Let's hope it doesn't happen, but we got to be prepared for everything. Stay tuned. Tomorrow, I'm going to be showing you guys my secret bunker location. Yes, I'm going to call it that. It's actually something slightly different than that, but we're going to call it that. So stick around. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.